It's been a long time coming, screenings before 1770, today at Village Cinemas, hosted by Al-Sadat College as a part of the Interfaith Youth Forum project. Welcome. My name is Burhan Yildiz, and I begin by acknowledging the ongoing custodians of this land, the Wurundjeri, and pay our respects to their elders past, present and emerging, and the elders that we have here with us today. We recognise their connection to land, waters and culture, and I stand with my Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander brothers and sisters on land that never ceded, and I commit to listening and learning about how I can better support First Nations people and begin by educating myself, my family and my community. It's through this commitment that we host this event, and we hope it's the first of many events, or one of many events that we host on this part. The Interfaith Youth Forum project was originally launched following the Christchurch mosque attacks, and it was launched to counter racial and religious discrimination. We hosted a range of events and programs pivoting through the challenges of the pandemic, and we hope that these initiatives give young people an opportunity to start thinking about discrimination against people of colour, against Indigenous people, Islamophobia, and what they can do to drive positive change in our community. With that, I'd like to welcome Muhammad for the opening prayer.
أيمانكم كتاب الله عليكم وأحل لكم ما وراء ذلكم أن تبتغوا بأموالكم محسنين غير مسافحين فمن لم يستطع منكم فآتوهن أجورهن فريضة ولا جناح عليكم فيما تراضيتم به من بعد الفريضة إن الله كان عليما حكيما. صدق الله العظيم.
At the start of the movie, it was very typical of the schooling that I had. I came to Australia in the mid-70s. I started kindergarten here. You know, in New South Wales Foundation is called kindergarten. And that's what we learned. And Aboriginal people, if we had a lesson on them, it was very much about boomerangs and didgeridoos and, you know, living off the land or eating this food. There was never any mention of the real history. When it came to real history, it was all about the Endeavour, the First Fleet, Captain James Cook. So there's a few points here that, you know, I am hopeful. There's been a lot of injustice, a lot of pain. Change takes time. So some of the things that you can keep an eye out for and things that you can be part of are the conversations around Australia Day. Some councils are now saying we're not going to celebrate Australia Day anymore. So these are Australian government institutions, councils now saying, you know, this is offensive to Aboriginal people. So the new Australian curriculum that's been released has got a lot more touch points in relation to Indigenous culture. I'm not sure exactly how far they've gone in addressing the injustices, but as we learn these things, it's important for us to tell the truth. I've actually been to southeast Sulawesi. I've been to a place called Kendari and some of the areas there. I haven't, Makassar's further south, but had I known when I'd been there, we were in a Jamaat and we were staying in mosques and visiting people. Had I known about this, I might have even tried to keep an eye out there for some people from an Aboriginal background. And also another reflection I thought I'd share with you. I lived in Auburn for 10 years before I moved to Melbourne. I grew up in Sydney, so I lived 30 years in Sydney. Some of those people in the movie, including some of the organisers, I actually knew them. And, you know, not just myself, other people, we actually used to invite them to the masjid, and we actually used to, you know, connect them to the masjid and connect them to Islam. And now, to see those people do this type of work is very powerful. So each one of you can be like that as well. Every single person has enormous capability. In fact, when we set up the school, there was one hadith of the Prophet ﷺ that we used to mention a lot, and we still mention. Prophet ﷺ mentioned people are like gold and silver mines. just like there are people are like mines, just like there are mines of gold and silver. So every single person has a huge capability. We don't know what every single person is capable of, but we have to make a big effort. And that question you asked about cultures, you know, if you have a look at it and how people communicate, if you have a look at the Sahaba, you know, when they travelled to different places, Egypt wasn't an Arab country.
Assalamualaikum everyone. I hope you've had a wonderful start to the day. I wanted to very briefly share with you my experience in this area you're going to be a part of today. I came to Australia when I was 7 years old as a migrant, and my schooling experience I would say is very, very different to, inshallah, your schooling experience. Having grew up in Sydney, and what we knew about the indigenous cultures is very different to what you are learning today and what you're about to learn. And I have a very deep respect for the people of this land, the original people of this land. I pay my respect to them. I acknowledge their continuing cultures and their continuing ownership of this land that we stand and enjoy today. As a migrant, I'm honoured to be in this country, to enjoy the many beauties and the many, many bounties that are here for us to offer. But there is such a history behind all of that we enjoy today that we cannot ignore. And for me, what's really powerful is the truth. And I grew up not knowing the truth. And our tradition, our Islamic tradition, tells us how important the truth actually is. In fact, it affects us all. And people say, if truth be told, what a different world it would be if truth was actually told. When I was growing up, and how I would feel with how I fit into this story. And the many, many national anthems that we sang. We are young and free. Never thought about young. No, we're not a young nation. In fact, we're thousands and thousands of years old as a nation. We hold such beautiful history that has not been told in the way it should have been told. And part of reconciliation, part of the healing process to make sure is we not only learn about the truth, we uphold the truth, and we make an effort to find out about the truth. Because when truth doesn't happen, it affects all of us, not just the people it directly affects at that time.
This film was actually produced to engage you and to help you in your life as you start out. Yeah? I'm not going to tell you the whole story because you'll get it once you see it. But the critical thing is how you learn from that. Yeah, there's enough discrimination and racism and displacement of people to go around. You don't need to continue to have to suffer that. So that's what this is about. But if I can get back to the main point. Yes, through my mother, I have traditional ownership or traditional custodianship of the land that we're meeting on. You know, through the Wurundjeri Willem clans of the Wurrung people. This is the land in which we're meeting today. Our traditional lands actually go from the Werribee River in the west to the Great Dividing Range in the north, to Mount Baw Baw in the east, and to a new decided line just near the city through the CBD. Traditional country, as opposed to a line somebody wrote or drew on a map, don't always connect, they don't always agree. I guess one of the key things with this movie, how this engages with Aboriginal people. You'll hear how some of the connections with the Macassan people of the island of the Sulawesi had engagement with Aboriginal people in the north. You'll see through, I think there's a touch on it that they talk about the Afghan Cameleers that came to Australia in the 1800s to help open up the centre of Australia, to create roads and to create pathways to deliver goods and services to people living in the centre. Had contact with Australia before Cook got here. As everybody's learned probably by now, you know, Captain Cook had this engagement that he came to Australia or this land, you know, in 1770 and, you know, claimed it for the King of the Day. Had no idea about that. He just did that from a point of, he was wasn't actually a captain. His actual title was a lieutenant. He was given the rank of a captain because he actually commanded the ship that came out. But his crew and everybody who dealt with him didn't think he was a very nice person. Historically, he told some dramatic lies. He went back to the Admiralty in England and said that there was nobody living here, that we could send all the convicts out here and clear our towns up. That was back in England. But his own logs actually told the story of engagement with Aboriginal people, who actually, when his ship ran aground up at Cooktown in far north Queensland, and the Endeavour River there is actually named after his ship that ran aground, Aboriginal people actually helped him, gave him some wood that wouldn't sink so that it could repair the ship, provided some water and food to sustain them, but no thanks was given. Post that, people have come out here and assumed our land. Squatters have taken over our land. Nobody's paid for it. As Sister Goulan said earlier, this land's never been ceded. In other words, we never gave it up. So I fully appreciate how a lot of Muslims who have come to this country feel. I've got a lot of Palestinian friends. I have an affinity with them because I understand exactly how they feel. They've been pushed out of their country. They've been moved off their traditional lands. They're persecuted. They're discriminated against on a daily basis. We all hear these stories from that part of the world. But I get that here. Our people have been getting that here for the last 200 years. So what I want to get across to you is the respect for the First Nations people is critical to how we engage with you, with the rest of the community, and how those respects and how the opportunities can be afforded to people. So, it's important for you as young Muslim people to go away from today going, actually get how that relationship is, and we're going to honour that. Because I do that regularly, As Sister alluded to earlier, I became a Muslim in 1995. So I've been around for a bit, but it's important to be able to respect our traditions and share them so we can all get along to make a more multicultural society, how they put it.
But, this is going to be a very exciting time, and this is a really important part of your journey, and I don't think you'll leave here unchanged, okay? So be alert and be awake to embark on what you're about to experience. First of all, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land that we are here today, the Wurundjeri Willam clan. I'd also like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land in which this short film was made, the Yolngu people of the northeastern Arnhem Land. We pay our respects to their elders past, present and emerging. So what you're about to see here today in this documentary is the story of two cultures. That of the Aboriginal people, the world's oldest continuing culture, who have been here for more than 60,000 years, and that of the Muslim Macassans who came here before 1770. This documentary was born out of the need for identity. Young teenagers, they could not identify being Australian. And when Sheikh Wissam held a workshop on the Muslim Macassans for the youth, there was a suggestion to visit Arnhem Land and experience country for themselves, and also to document that journey. What eventuated was a profound experience for the youth, which delivered a message for us all. We are connected to this land. We belong to this land, and this predates 1770. Jawa told his story, and we are telling our story. Aboriginal people have been on this land for 60 to 80,000 years. They lived and they flourished. And in that vast, rich history of country, there was a strong and rich connection between the Muslim Macassans and the Aboriginal people. These were our ancestors that married, traded, and loved the Aboriginal people. The connections were deep, and they exchanged customs that are still present to this day. There was an understanding between spiritual people, because in the words of Jawa himself, he said, spiritual people always understand one another. And this reminds us the verse in the Quran where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, I have created you male and female and rendered you into nations and tribes so that you can know one another. And note how Allah says to know one another, not to tolerate one another, but to know in one another, meaning having deep and meaningful engagements between each other. And this took place between the Aboriginal people and the Muslim Macassans. I cannot tell the Aboriginal story, but I can tell you the story of the Muslim Macassans, a rich history that you cannot overlook. The message from today is empowering to us all, particularly you all, our future generation, our Muslim future generation. It defines us and it is incredibly powerful. Our Muslim ancestors had a rich and long connection to the Aboriginal people on this land for hundreds of years, to country. They loved each other, respected one another, and looked forward to seeing one another. This is our reference point, and not that of the European white settlement. The important message to take from today is clear in this documentary. Islam is no stranger to the first people of the land. Because of such, we can identify with this land. And for this, we are proud and privileged to have this connection to the custodians of the land. So before we proceed, I'd just like to highlight two things. The opening scene may be confronting for some of you, and there is no intention to cause offence or stereotype anyone. This is just a reenactment of a real life event. And also our sponsors appear in the first few minutes of the presentation, and we have not removed them. Jazakallah.
Okay, so assalamu alaikum, Mister. It's a great thing to see you here as an Aboriginal elder today. We want to ask you about your reflection about this documentary and how it made you feel as an Aboriginal Muslim person.
Well, as an Aboriginal Muslim, it actually afforded me the opportunity to see how the two communities can integrate and connect. And this is what I'm trying to do in Victoria. It was an opportunity for those kids in Sydney to go up to Arnhem Land to understand and appreciate that. But there's lots of Aboriginal people around Sydney too, and that needs to sort of then foster that engagement there as well. And down here, we need to be able to do that with the Muslim community down here as well. Now, I'm doing that. I sort of have a bit to do with the Islamic Council Victoria, and hopefully that can sort of progress that ideal. But this opportunity of young people seeing that, and the school, Al Sirat, actually developing an opportunity where some students can do a similar trip for a similar outcome and progress that, and actually take the opportunity of actually expanding on all those opportunities as well. That's the next step, really. It's not about creating another ship that comes from Sulawesi to Australia. The next step, that's for theirs. For the next step for Al Sirat is actually to sort of replicate that in a way, maybe go to the similar place, but have those kids go there, because they're the ones that are actually going to come back, rewrite that story and actually pass that on to others. And every child, every young person that was in the cinema today should feel what Sister Muna said was about, now you've got this responsibility and you've got this opportunity to challenge injustice. Yes, they do. And it is an opportunity of growth and potential leadership for young people.
And what would you say to the Muslim youth as an Aboriginal person? What message could you give them about how the Aboriginals felt, and what responsibility do they have here in Australia as a non-Muslim country?
Very similar to what I just said. Young people really need to take up the mantle of actually being that interface with other Muslim kids, other kids from other backgrounds, and engage Aboriginal youth so that there's a common platform that we're all Australian. Mm-hmm. The respect for the First Nations people. You're an Aboriginal person. We really want to pay respect to you and encourage you to participate in our background as well. You know, a lot of people ask me, well, how can we get more Aboriginal people interested in Islam? Easy way is to particularly invite them, like Muslim open, Masjid open days, is invite them into the mosque, because they go in, they go, wow, I didn't know anything was like this. Wow, I had some other idea. It's about understanding the opportunity of where Aboriginal people can be seen and appreciated and included. It's about this whole thing's about inclusion.
And why do you think that the truth about the interactions between the first Muslims and the Aboriginal people was hidden? And why do you think that we were told that the first settlers here were the white settlers, as it said in the start of the movie? The people believe that the white settlers were the first people to step foot on Australia. So what's the overall message behind hiding that truth?
It's about uncovering history and telling the truth. Yeah, like I said in my discussion with students was, Cook didn't tell the truth. So we shouldn't just give him all this gratitude and publicity to be this great part of history, Australian history, because it's not. It's not actually. He told an injustice. He told the mistruth, which ended up Australia becoming a penal colony. Muslims that have come from other parts of the world to come to Australia to call it home, those younger people need to understand that history and go, we can tell a better, truthful history about how Muslims were involved with First Nations people here, and how that's progressed and engaged, and how that truth and equity can be to be managed in a better way.